The gift of a new morning. And I had a very beautiful gift recently, getting to know a person who is doing marvelous work. She's an atheist, and she is a very accomplished film producer, director, creator, and she dedicates her free time to helping girls at risk through the medium of photography, teaching them photography and teaching them all that skill. And that's very important for girls today because they are so conscious of themselves, and they take all these selfie pictures and they want to do it with great perfection and great success. So she has a captive audience. But one big thing she really wants to teach them is to turn the camera around. To turn the camera around. I was fascinated by this. Turn the camera around. Meaning that the camera, these girls have the camera always focused on themselves, and turn the camera around and notice others. Notice the need of others. Make others happy. Think about others. I was very impressed. I love this idea. It's so needed. Turn the camera around. Look at something some people did last night. They put these 3 sets of seats here so they could, in a certain sense, look at each other. That's the meaning of all gatherings and getting together with people, to notice the other. A very important dimension of life. I don't know if you were ever asked a question. Some people said to you, "Are you saved?" Have you ever been asked that question? Are you saved? And somebody asked Jesus a similar question today. How do I get saved? How do I enter eternal life? And that's our gospel today. So it's very, very interesting. And we should also, I call this part 1, okay? Are you saved, part 1? And tomorrow we'll have part 2. I don't know how you answer. How do you feel when people come up to you and ask you this? You could even be in a shopping mall. You could be at a gas station. You could find that question anywhere. And it's kind of interesting because it means these people are really, really, really concerned for your eternal welfare. And I am too. And that's what is the core of actually the whole biblical story. Are you saved? And they asked Jesus the question, so now Jesus has a chance to answer about this. How can I be saved? How can I enter eternal life? And he basically says, turn the camera around. Well, not really. That'd be step 1, okay? Turn the camera around. And so he quotes the great texts of the Hebrew Scriptures, probably the 2 great pillars of understanding, of looking at reality. And the first one, I think it's Deuteronomy, the second one is from Leviticus. It's to love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and all your might. And the second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, actually, apparently, when this guy asked the question, he wasn't doing it just purely to ask the question. He wanted to trip up Jesus. That's a funny attitude, isn't it? Can you hear the coyote? Or jackal? Lots of bird activity around here this morning. I wonder what's disturbing that coyote. I hear the coyote. It's a lone jackal up there on Mount Arbel calling out. I love this spot here. So then the guy, because he wasn't really just looking for an answer, now he had to kind of save his own face in a way, or he was uncomfortable or nervous or whatever. And he said, well, who's my neighbor? And we have that incredible short story. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful short story. Once during COVID here, when we had mostly Israeli visitors because they couldn't leave the country and outsiders weren't coming in. So we had a lot of groups coming, you know. And one day I had the idea to ask a question. What kind of literature is the New Testament? Because in order to understand the art in Duc and Altum, you need any work of art, you need to know the story behind it. And the story behind behind all this work of art is obviously the major scenes of the New Testament. And so I asked that question, you know, what kind of literature is the New Testament? And I got the most craziest, most amazing and very beautiful and poignant answers that really impressed me very much. And about maybe 50 different answers. I'm really sorry now that I didn't write them all down, because they could almost make a book. But the very first one was, the New Testament is a collection of short stories. And I thought, wow, I never thought about that. But the Good Samaritan story that we have today in the Gospel is really a short story. And it's a brilliant one. Absolutely brilliant. There's so much drama in there. There's so much reality check of humanity. There's such a great discernment morally. There's the exposure of spiritual conceitedness in its hypocrisy and its bankruptcy sometimes. You know, it's so powerful. There's so much conveyed in that. And there's a great charter for humanity in the Good Samaritan story. And how many thousands and thousands of Good Samaritan works, formally, officially organized with that name, are there all over the world? And some of them very big, doing incredible work. The Good Samaritan, an amazing, powerful, fruitful short story in the history of humanity. And so we know the story very well because it's so familiar, you know. And so we have the guy that's beaten up by robbers and left for half dead, which still happens today. There are so many plunderers of humanity in all shapes and sizes, all across the world, in every community, in every ethnic group, in every social context. There are either people helping others or they're plundering others. And a lot of people that are just there asleep, just there for themselves. So there we have the Good Samaritan, you know, and he gets down on his knees and he takes that broken person with great compassion and pours oil and wine on his wounds to purify them. To imagine there were flies. How many hours was he in there in that ditch? How were the condition of his wounds? Was he half conscious? And there he is, carrying out that great command to love your neighbor as yourself. How could you not have compassion on a person that's broken, that's beaten up in any dimension of human life? Beaten up physically, first of all, in our bodies, but beaten up also in our soul, in our self-esteem, beaten up in insulted, broken, deprived, dispossessed, abused, violently attacked, driven out of homestead by all kinds of violence. Humanity bears a tremendous burden. But then you have the beat up people that are beaten up because they themselves are violent and they're completely disfigured. And you have people beaten up in so many different ways, beaten up spiritually. There's a famous story going around about how a sect was overcome in Central America recently. And I was surprised. It was a Jewish sect at work in jungles. And there can be extremes in any community that cause lots of damage. These extremes are lose the balance of the human being and don't take care of the great balance, because we're works of balance. There are some extreme sports performers. There are some extremely dedicated intellectuals or musicians or artists, but in general, the human being requires a lot of balance. And so the plundered human being, you know. And then this man with so much compassion, the Good Samaritan, and he was actually in an enemy category. So to be able to look at our enemies and to notice that there can be extraordinary compassion there, that's already a great act of humanity. To discover that the human being who is against me in many ways, different from me in many ways, can also do so much good. Isn't that wonderful? A wonderful way to live. To discover the good in the other. The good that God has put into the other. The good that can be developed and flourished, the life that can be saved and rescued. To turn the camera around and focus on the needs of the others. That's a great therapy for people that are plagued by a habit of complaining. Always complaining, always upset, always disappointed. Nothing is right. And we do have our aches and pains for sure, and our frustrations. But again, we need a great balance there. And look at the efforts this Good Samaritan makes in order to bring life back to this person and to guarantee that it will be sustained. Such an active path. Go and do likewise. Go and do likewise. See, the faith we have needs expression in deeds. It's not either or. Our faith is not just an act of pure spiritual faith, because then we would be denying the body. We would be denying our corporate unity. We walk together. We grow together. We bear each other's burdens. We're there to help each other. We're not just a philosophy of life. We're actually a way of life. And that's one of the words that was used in the very early Christian community. The name, one of the first names that was given was called the Way. It was a way, it was a path. It was like down here, you know. It's a way to walk. It's not just a way to look at. Ways are made for walking, for getting you from one place to another. It's a way of life. How do I get to eternal life? I go on the way with others, in their needs, with their strengths, making place for others in my life, in my time, in my schedule. A life lived for others. And that's really the whole mystery of the incarnation. God didn't stay in heaven on his throne. He came down to tend our wounds, to reveal that mercy. And we're made in the same stamp, in the image of God. People, God bless you. And now, just because you all asked me, I turned the camera around for a second, but just for a second. God bless you. Thank you for joining. See you later, alligators. Have a wonderful day, blessed looking at others. Turn the camera around and look at the others. God bless you. See you later, alligators.